In this video, I'll be sharing with you what is possible in the world of aviation and something that I know that a lot of people don't even think about as they are going through their journey of becoming a pilot or a professional pilot. As we know in the airlines, the official retirement age is 65. Once you clock 65, you are forced to retire even if you're in the top health shape. But this is a video that I found online in which someone is actually making it work even at the age above 70, still working and making very good money for it. If you're new here, my name is Stephen Ojo, and on this channel we'll talk about aviation, and hopefully I can share tips and of course bring you valuable information that would help you to hopefully achieve your goal in the fastest way possible, the cheapest way possible, and of course hopefully have a very good career ahead of you as well. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing to the channel, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And in fact, I would appreciate if you can just do that now. Thank you so much. It really helps this video and helps the channel so much. It takes a lot of work to make all this, especially this, even though this is not my full-time job. You know that this is not something I do full-time. This is something I just do as a passion and as a hobby. And it definitely helps to keep me going. So let's get into the video.
The official term for a community like this is a residential air park. Basically a place where you can live with your airplane and walk out the door and go fly.
Let me tell you a little bit about this individual that we're watching, Joe. He happens to be a retired United States Air Force pilot, used to fly fighter jets. And currently he lives in California, lives in a residential air park. And if you think about it, it's just like a small airport with residential buildings around it. The homes on the air park are built with hangars on them. So a lot of people that are retired, maybe pilots or even active pilots, would generally find places like this to live because sometimes they're generally remote. They're usually out of the main city. As you know, a lot of noise from this type of airport would cause the city to not want them in highly dense areas, like the highly populated areas. But for the benefit of being able to have his airplane, his hangar in one place and his home, it definitely worth that amount of money. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you is this is what they call living the dream when it comes to the life of an airline pilot. Being able to pretty much fly to work and fly at work and then fly back home, and you generally do not have to drive at all.
Groveland, California is about 26 miles from here to the gates to Yosemite National Park. It is pristine, a beautiful, quiet spot. Anybody would love living up here.
This pilot makes around $250,000 even after the age of 65. Like, he's a test pilot making around $250,000 a year. And that is generally an average that a lot of test pilots do make, especially if you're working for, in this case, a major US airline. That is not a bad amount to be making even after the age of 65. So something that a lot of people need to keep in mind is the ability to still earn even after you retire is there, as long as you have the health for it.
Essentially on call as a test pilot, and I almost always work out of San Francisco International Airport. My commute to work is a 100 nautical mile commute, or about 150 miles driving by car. So what I normally do is jump in the airplane and fly down to San Carlos. It takes about 45 minutes to 55 minutes, depending on the winds, weather, and which airplane I'm flying.
So something that he mentioned is he's always on call as a test pilot, and what that means is pretty much like being on reserve, and that means you have your schedule for maybe 4 days in a row or maybe 5 days in a row, and you are on call between a certain time up until a certain time in the evening. So sometimes they will have what they call the morning on call schedule or maybe the evening on call schedule. It all depends on the structure. But the point here is being on call is pretty much being on reserve, and that means you get a phone call from the scheduler that calls you to come to work at a certain time. So they give you a report time. So with each type of schedule, like he said, when he's on call, he's pretty much at home, and when he gets a call to come to work, jumps on his airplane and flies to work. Now, this is something I'm thinking about in this case. Being on call, I don't know what their procedure is, or maybe how much in advance they get notified of their schedule. Like you said, it takes about 3 hours to drive, about 45 minutes to fly. Most on-call procedures with airlines will generally they'll generally give you a window of an hour, 2 hours to report for work. Now, as a test pilot, I'm pretty sure it's probably different. It could maybe be as long as maybe 2-3 hours to report, or sometimes some people would actually have an advance notice in which they can be notified of their schedule, maybe at least 12 hours in advance to report. So it all depends. But this is not a bad deal considering he's able to fly to work, and of course he's able to avoid all the commute by driving.
Park the airplane, jump in a car that I keep out there, my old airport car, and drive up to SFO to go to work.
If you notice, he mentioned something about an airport car. What this means is that it generally keeps an airport even on standby for transporting himself back and forth between his airport station and maybe if he has what they call a crash pad, or place where you stay to pass the night. Now, a lot of pilots do that. I have a crash pad, and in fact, I'm actually in one right now, and that is because I am on call as well. So once he gets to his airport, flying in from home, he's able to drive himself without having to rely on other expensive means of transportation, for example, using Lyft and Uber and all that, or relying on someone else.
The airport here is owned by Tuolumne County, so it's a county-owned public use airport. This airport is uncontrolled, which means there's no control tower, so I don't really have to tell anybody if I'm going flying. All I have to do is taxi out and take off. As a courtesy for other pilots and as a safety measure, the airport does have what we call a common traffic advisory frequency.
Departure end of runway 27.
And we use that frequency to broadcast our position and our intentions, so any other pilots that may be out there flying know we're out there flying, and they're able to coordinate with us for use of the runway.
Now, one thing he mentioned is that the airport, which is a residential air park, is an uncontrolled airport. And what this means is usually when you go to the big airports where you have all the big jets flying into, they're usually controlled. They have a control tower. They have a controller that is pretty much giving instructions on when to take off, when to land, when to taxi, and so forth. But when it comes to an air park, a residential air park like this, it's an uncontrolled airport in which there is no control tower. There is nobody giving instructions on when to take off or when to land. So the procedure here in this situation and in other parts of the US where they have all uncontrolled airports is that you have a frequency which is called a common traffic advisory frequency, which is used by people that are operating in and out of that airport. And as it sounds, it's an advisory frequency. So pretty much if you are about to taxi, you pretty much advise other pilots that may be on that frequency of your intentions. The other thing also is if you're going to take off, you want to also advise other pilots that are probably inbound or taking off or landing, inbound to land, or maybe probably taking off as well, of your intentions. And of course, you have to always keep an eye outside by looking to make sure that there is no person that is flying in and out without a radio, because that could also happen. It's an uncontrolled airport. Pretty much people do fly in there without radios, and is it recommended? I wouldn't do that, but there are some airplanes that are probably so old, do not have such avionics system on board, and they're probably still flying. Some people will be flying experimental airplanes in and out of these airports. Again, it's an uncontrolled airport, so it's a free-for-all up to an extent. But of course, most people are professional. Everybody tries to be safe. But there has been issues and incidents in the past, or even accidents in the past, where two airplanes are not seeing each other and they collide, or they are pretty much on the same approach. And one has a low wing, one has a high wing structure, and pretty much they're unable to see each other, and they actually collided. And this is why communication in such areas can be very essential to keep the situational awareness for everyone going.
I have a partner in the airplane. He's a retired American Airlines pilot. He lives down in Menlo Park, so we keep the airplane occasionally down there at San Carlos Airport where we have a hangar.
As you can see, this is another thing that he did that I believe was really smart. A lot of people generally want to own an airplane and they want to just have the right to it alone, which means they want to go all in. But owning an airplane, no matter how small, can be very expensive. Maintaining the airplane can be very expensive. By partnering with someone, first of all, it reduces the cost of you going alone to buy the airplane, and of course, it also reduces the cost of the routine maintenance that you are putting on the airplane. The other thing that it reduces the cost on is to keep the airplane. For example, you may have to find an hangar to put the airplane in, which means there's a monthly cost for that, there's a monthly cost for insurance, and so forth. All of those costs will be spread around by going in with 2 or more people. And of course, as long as your schedules can work, you guys can find ways to share it and not get into any conflict with your schedules, then it's a good way to go because it reduces the cost of owning that airplane.
And happily, I'm also a FAA certified A&P mechanic, airframe and power plant mechanic, so I do most of my maintenance myself. So that saves a fair amount of money. I know some people are concerned about the safety aspects of flying, and I've heard general aviation flying roughly equated to riding a motorcycle as far as the relative safety of doing it.
The other thing that I would say is, as you can see, it's also a maintenance as well, a certified A&P, which is very awesome because with that way, all his routine maintenance, all the annual inspections and so forth, all those will be done by him because he's certified and he can pretty much sign it off and say it's good to go. The other thing also is that this is his own airplane too, right? So he wants to make sure he's able to do the best work possible to keep it in a safe, airworthy condition. And that is something that, if you are just a normal pilot without an A&P certification, owning an airplane, you're putting your trust in someone else doing the job right. But in this situation, he's making sure that the job is done right because he's the one actually doing it. And he's also going to be the one flying it. So his ability to trust what he's done and also make sure that he's doing what is best for himself, is there. The interest is there. And that is something that I believe is really smart that he's got going. Now, considering what he's got going for him, I believe that this is really a good plan that is working out for him. He's able to fly into work, fly back home, and cut down on the traffic and cut down the time. And of course, if you look at it, it's probably much cheaper for him to also do this. As a pilot that is above 65 and still flying, making over $250,000 a year, that is not a bad deal at all as a test pilot. I believe he's living the dream, and that is something that I am giving him so much respect for. And I hope that you can also do that. I hope to be able to do something like that sometime in my own future as well. I hope you found value in this video. If you have, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and I look forward to seeing you on my next one too.